Hello, everyone. Welcome to Move More, Worry Less. I'm your host, Paige Vesta, the founder and designer at 13 Fit Apparel. Today's guest is Courtney Lee, who is a life coach, and she specializes in eating disorders within adolescents. Today's topic is specifically about eating disorders within boys, which I find really interesting, so I hope you enjoy. So, Courtney, we're going to dive right into it. Let's talk about who you are and what you do, and then we'll make our way into today's topic.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for having me, Paige.
Yes.
I am Courtney Lee, and I work in the Metro Atlanta area at an adolescent eating disorder facility. It's with residential options. So our clients come and stay with us usually for a minimum of 4 weeks, but sometimes it's as much as 6 months.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So let's talk about your journey to becoming a life coach and how you got into this specific area of coaching and working with eating disorders.
Sure. So my background is in teaching. I have been working with kids for over a decade. And when I was working with families after class or for parent-teacher meetings, I noticed that the connection that I had with working with families as a whole was really significant for me. I felt like I was honestly able to be a better teacher when I started to understand and become closer to the families. So that being said, I had my own counselor who was wonderful back in like 2018. And she had just shared with me about life coaching and the school she had been to. I loved it. I loved everything about that. And went to a certified school out in San Diego, came back and started coaching about 6 months prior to the pandemic.
Wow. So what is, can you define what life coaching is and what that means, I guess?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about coaching that is different from counseling is that counseling and therapy usually focuses on people's past that also involves past trauma, whereas coaching is focusing on the client's or the person's present and their future goals.
Okay.
A lot of times in counseling, those therapists are trained to help people work through past. But in coaching, we're trained to help people see where they want to be in their present and see where they would like to go in their future. And we are just facilitators and guides to get them there.
Gotcha. So when you're working with your clients, does that mean that you're not necessarily counseling them through like their history with eating disorders? You're kind of working with them to move forward. Is that what that looks like?
That's correct. Yeah. So at our location, we have over 6 therapists that are on staff, and we have over 10 coaches. And so the therapists are there to help work with them in individual sessions as well as family sessions. And that's happening weekly for every client, which is wonderful. And it's hugely successful with our clients. We get a ton of positive feedback. We also have coaches that are there 24/7. So when they are not in a guided session with a therapist, they have the opportunity to do a one-on-one check-in or just are being like assisted throughout the day by these medical coaches. And we're able to help them work on daily goals, work on therapy assignments, as well as just where they're at, what their bodies are saying to them in that moment, and maybe what they're feeling in terms of anxiety and where exactly they're feeling that in their bodies.
What does a typical, and I know that it's probably very individualized, but if you were to give kind of a typical experience with a client, what does that look like a session or one of your meetings with them?
Sure. I can give an example of something I actually did this week with a client.
Perfect.
So this week we had one of our clients who's been with us for almost 2 months. He was experiencing a lot of anxiety One of the coaches had tried to guide him into talking it out or just being present. He was not able to do that. I entered the space and we were able to sit down on the ground, have a quiet moment, turn on some breathing sessions that we use that I found through Wim Hof, who's a wonderful breathing coach, and do those sessions where we are able to sit across from one another, hands on our knees, and go through about 10 minutes of a breathing session and just calm down that anxiety.
Mhm.
After doing the sessions and checking in between, the client was able to experience a lot more grounding work, feeling grounded, and was able to communicate like, okay, I'm through that anxiety. I'm able to go and be present now with the other group.
Yeah. I'm really excited to dive into our topic about eating disorders in boys. But before we do, I'm very curious about this breathing exercise. Is that something that you could share with us?
Sure. So there's a gentleman by the name of Wim Hof, and he is known all across the world as being someone who pushes his body to the limits. He has actually climbed a big majority of Mount Everest in shorts and hiking boots. And he's been able to do this all through using mind and body work of being able to control what his body temperature is just with his mind. So this is something that he has promoted, I would say, over the last 3 years and offered it to the world as something, that we can do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
A lot of people can look up his work and find that. And this is something that we offer even to our clients, just as an opportunity for them to see that, again, through coaching, we want them to be able to take back their own space and claim it and know that they have the opportunity to even ground themselves at times when things feel out of control.
Amazing. So is the breathing exercise something that you listen to and follow along with, or is it a specific, like what does that look like?
There is a breathing exercise that you can pull up and follow
Okay.
along with. And then once you are able to understand that and guide that yourself, you can do that either for yourself or with clients. So
cool. I feel like our
yeah.
listeners will love that. I'm definitely going to look into it. So our
Absolutely.
topic today is eating disorders in boys. And I'm really excited to talk about this because I think it's almost, I don't want to say acceptable or like more accepted, but it's more talked about that females experience a lot of eating disorders and anxiety around food. And we've done episodes on that before. And it's a really interesting topic, but we don't, and I don't see it talked about all that often, but eating disorders in boys. And so, I mean, I'm going to give you the floor here and let you start it out however feels good for you. I definitely have questions I want to sprinkle in, but like, let's just go into this topic and yeah, let's go for it.
Great. Yeah, so you're exactly right, Paige. Over 90% of eating disorders are affecting women or young girls. So what we're seeing in the eating disorder community and the mental health world is we are focusing on those female clients or born female. But what we are also seeing is just a huge increase of families bringing their sons to us and saying, I don't know for sure, but I think my son has an eating disorder. Or the son is open and saying to their family, yes, I have an eating disorder, or I'm having a hard time eating. That looks very different in the family or in the world of boys, but we are seeing an increase in that, I would say, every month.
Wow. And what do you think the reason for that is? Or do you know the reason?
I have been able to communicate with a lot of our male clients that we've had just in the past year at the Atlanta location. And an overwhelming amount of feedback that we're getting is the pressures or the expectations that they're feeling through social media. There is a lot of influencers or people who are just famous for what they look like. And then sometimes it's deeper and it's because they are a famous athlete or they're a famous actor, something like that. but there is a movement where younger males are more and more feeling pressure to have a certain body type. And that is really influencing the eating disorder world right now.
Is there a specific age range that this is applying to, or is it across the board?
It's a great question. I work specifically with adolescents. So my clientele is 11 to 17, but
Yeah.
where we're seeing an increase is usually around the age of 15, 16 is where the eating disorder ramps up for boys.
Yeah.
And it's heightened as they're getting closer to their 20s.
Right. That's wild. I mean, it makes sense. Social media is wonderful in so many ways, but it definitely has its negative sides. So let's talk about what an eating disorder looks like in boys. Like, how are they similar to females? How are they different? Are they, because I mean, we talk about, I mean, there's like bulimia and anorexia, and there's a lot more, and there's like combinations, and I'm not sure that there's a label for everything, but I'm curious as to, are those the same things that boys are experiencing, or does it look different? Is it labeled as something different? What does that all look like?
Right. So there are clients who are males and they have bulimia, they have anorexia, they have high anxiety levels. That would be the overarching connection between our male and female clients, or even our anorexic to our bulimic clients, is the anxiety connection for sure. What I would say another overlap is, as we know, young people are constantly being promoted to be like someone else right now. And there's a very little downtime for them to sit back and be themselves and really reflect on who they are. So vulnerability is really big.
Yeah.
The way vulnerability appears in young women looks different for young men. So where, as an example of a girl coming to her family and saying, I'm having a hard time eating, that might look something like a lot of tears and shame, and coming in and saying like, I don't feel good about myself. The way it might look for a boy is he might continue to say at the dinner table, I'm full. There's not going to be as much emotional cues with a male client as there would be with our female clients. There's also a lack of vulnerability that young boys want to display with their parents, that young girls just naturally have more comfort with being able to be vulnerable with their friends and family.
Right. I want to go back on something you said about how young people, adolescents now, don't really have time to just like sit back and like be themselves and reflect on themselves. And I don't have anything like really to add to that, but I just can't imagine what it's like to be young. Well, I mean, I guess I'm kind of young, but like, like a teenager now, because I mean, when I was a teenager, I was like, I didn't know what was going on in the world. I was just like playing outside and walking around the neighborhood, and like, we didn't have social media. And I know it affects me and other adults. So I can't even imagine like the impact it has on young people.
Right.
Yeah.
If you are in your 30s or 40s and you're a parent, this generation of parents is the first set of parents to have a huge divide between electronics and social media influence. So what those families are going through right now is they are seeing having children who've known nothing but having access to the internet and all that comes with that, yet being parents who were not raised that way. So we're seeing a huge contrast. It would almost be like, Paige, having a parent who's 50, to 70 years older than you, right? Where there's this lack of connection and understanding because the kids are all seeing life as the only world they've ever known.
Right.
With a tremendous amount of open social media, even something as little as like YouTube Kids.
Right.
Most kids who are teenagers now had that 10 years ago when they were between the ages of 4 to 7.
Right.
So they were immersed within this very early.
Yeah.
So we're now seeing families that are trying to connect and communicate with their teens, but they just don't understand this world.
Right. Do you think that the anxiety and the pressure in adolescence now is more than it was when the older generations were younger? Or do you think that they're just more open about it? Like what's your thoughts on that?
I have done some research on this. I'm also a mother of 3. I have 2 teens myself,
Yeah.
as well as a teenager. And what I am seeing is that when there is a lack of downtime to do anything, whether that is rest, whether that is healthy eating habits, or whether that is staying away from screens, there is an increased amount of pressure for these kids to not be able to self-reflect, have more self-awareness, and just simply like take a step back and ask themselves, is this real?
Right. I I had a question. Hold on. So, and this is a similar question, but as far as eating disorders in boys, do you think that's something that has always been around and it hasn't been as, lack of a better word, accepted? Or do you think it's higher in boys now because of social media and these pressures? Like, do you think it's kind of the same question, but it's specifically with the boys and the increase of boys that you're seeing come into your facility?
Yes, I do think that eating disorders have been around for men and women since, the start of dawn. But I do think that the obsessive culture that we have in focusing or hyper focusing on influencers, on ideal living, on what influencers would say is acceptable, right? These things are 24/7. And because teens have access to this 24/7, there is not those states of downtime page like you and I know from our years growing up, where we could just leave that social environment like school, go home, have a couple hours to ourselves, turn on the television, or go play outside. This is no longer happening. So what I'm seeing is a huge increase in both boys and girls, but specifically boys,
Right.
because that's our topic for today,
Yeah.
and how they are really struggling with knowing when to put that natural filter on of when is a good stop line for them, where is a good boundary line.
Yeah. So, I want to think of how I want to word this question.
Sure.
Um, I just lost my question. Excellent. Best podcast host ever.
Yeah.
At what point does, I think, well, we did an episode on disordered eating versus eating disorders. And I would love to get your input on at what point does it become unhealthy? Because, you could be eating healthy or restricting calories in a certain way for health reasons or performance or, whatever reason it is. And you could be really health conscious, but at what point does that become a problem? And at what point do you see that turning into like disordered eating or an eating disorder with young boys?
This is a huge topic, so I'm really glad that you brought this up. A lot of times our clients feel affirmed when they can identify with someone like them. So they will ask us regularly on staff, like, do you have an experience with an ED? ED standing for eating disorder. So some of us on staff have, and we're able to share that and affirm them and support them in that. And some of us are not, but we are able to identify with disordered eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're able to affirm them in that way. And a lot of times what we're seeing with families is that our clients are coming in, and this is not an isolated case. We don't have a male client who's coming in at 17, and he just on his own independently had started disordered eating, and then it turned into an eating disorder. What we generationally see is the family lineage having disordered eating and passing that on to the client. And sometimes it's a full-on eating disorder within the family unit. So we're seeing these kids who are coming in, and they will be calorie counting. Even if the box is not available with the calories, they already have memorized certain foods and what that is. And when we explain to them that not only is that not disordered eating, but that's actually part of the eating disorder voice, they are really surprised to find out that other people are not doing this.
Yeah. Let's talk more about the eating disorder voice.
Great. So the clients really value us being able to identify them as individuals, which that's what they are. And so a great way for us to do that at our location is we let them know that the eating disorder has a voice, and that voice can get louder and louder if we don't counteract that voice with truth. A lot of the truths that we speak over them is that the eating disorder wants them to stay isolated. They want them to stay within the eating disorder and keep those disordered thoughts going. So what we do is we food challenge ourselves, any sort of scary foods for that particular client, and that varies client to client. We will create a list of what foods are challenges for them, and we will work on those weekly. We'll add one to the list. We also talk about, again, like calorie counting, how this is not something that people do when they're going to meet their friends for lunch. They're not looking at the menu and thinking about, okay, what has the lowest amount of calories? They're choosing based off of hunger cues. The eating disorder voice does not want us as people or our clients to listen to hunger cues. They want us to stay restricted. So when we tell our clients, that is not your voice, that is the eating disorder voice, it empowers our clients to recognize that they are battling something within themselves and that they don't need to be ashamed of that.
Right. So would you say that the eating disorder voice is like equivalent to like anxiety? Is that what it is? Or do you think it's something separate, like a coping mechanism for the anxiety? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would almost say anxiety's cousin is the eating disorder.
Yeah.
They're all within the mental health umbrella.
Yeah.
But it merges and it varies and it customizes itself into specifically an eating disorder.
Yeah.
They're definitely related though.
Right. So how does working out play into all of this? Do you find that a lot of the boys work out a lot, or some of them do, some of them don't? Is working out part of their eating disorder? Is it a coping mechanism? What does fitness look like for these boys?
Usually 50% of our clients who are male biologically, they come in and they do have a history of over exercise, and they have been on 2+ sports almost their entire lives.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of connection between exercise and fitness desires, along with disordered eating or eating disorders in boys.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do boys talk about, like we were talking about, kind of going back into things that we were saying before, there's these pressures, right, from social media on who you should be like, what you should look like. Do these boys share with you like what that pressure is and what it feels like and what specifically is impacting them?
Yeah. I mean, they'll go into who they want to emulate. We will do an inventory on what social media they have. And what's so great is a lot of our therapists will work with each client and we'll do a social media purge. So we will clean out any sort of following that they have on someone that just really isn't healthy. They've either over prioritized the influence or it's become something that's very toxic in their life based off of their disordered thoughts. So yeah, they're very open, guys and girls, but I've always been very surprised at how open our male clients are
Yeah.
about what's going on with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So is it generally like they feel like they need to be muscular and lean and that kind of a thing? Or
What we're seeing is we're seeing like a strong amount of definition is what they're aiming for.
okay.
So if it is the athletic clients, they're working towards a lean toned body. And so it will go into an anorexia pathway where they can be as thin as they can. So in order to define those muscles, even to the point where this is an example story. A client, when getting his blood drawn from one of our nurses, would hold his wrist and pump his hand back and forth just to see the veins pop out more. And that was just something that he so desired to see such definition within his
Mhm.
arm that the eating disorder voice even encouraged that to go on in front of nursing. I
Right.
mean, it's that prominent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I would guess, and I could be wrong, but I mean, it's no secret that obesity is a disease that's everywhere in the United States. So do you find that a lot of your male clients, male adolescent clients are coming from a place of being overweight, or is there any, I don't know, is there anything you could say about that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do treat clients who have disordered eating and eating disorders within binge as
Okay.
well, binge and purge. And so we have several clients who would be considered obese, and we've worked with them before as well. And what we're seeing with them is they don't have a history of um, athleticism. It is more of, again, it's just what we're seeing is a lot of repeats in family history where a family member did not have a healthy relationship to food, coped with those stressors of life that we all are going through, and then passed those traits on to their son or grandson.
Right.
So we're seeing that as well, where those disordered thoughts and the disordered relationship to how to cope with their anxiety, with their stress, is now not under eating, but overeating.
I think that's a really interesting thing. And I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to being a parent or anything, but I think it's important that you say that and people know that because, um, as an outsider, again, not being a parent, you hear parents saying that like they don't have time or whatever the case is for to take care of themselves and be healthy. But then that can, I mean, essentially what you're saying is that if they're not taking care of themselves, it could be passed on to their children, which I guess makes complete sense. But I think it's important that you say that because a lot of what we talked about earlier is that eating disorders are coming from the pressure of social media, but like it could be coming from the fact that you as an adult have some sort of unhealthy relationship with food. And I just think that's really interesting and important for people to know.
Right. Yeah, what we see a lot of times is we will ask our clients when they're coming in, what type of food rules do you guys have at home? Can you tell us a little bit about the food rules that mom and dad has for you or your guardian has for you? And when we look through or when we get an inventory of what some of those are, a lot of times families are over focused on preservatives, calorie counting, even eating organic. And this can stem from an originally healthy place. If
Mhm.
someone has a gluten intolerance, if someone has an allergy, I mean, these things they're not within our control.
Right.
But we see families, specifically the parents, who take it to an unhealthy place. And so then those children are restricting, even at a very young age, not realizing that they're already beginning the early stages of an eating disorder.
How do you then implement healthy eating habits within like the family dynamic and not allow it to get to the point of being unhealthy? Like how do you manage that? And because it sounds really easy to be going in with a healthy thought and trying to
Right.
be healthy, but then it becoming a problem? Like where, yeah, that was a terrible question, but I think you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the way we are able to support families with our clients individually, as well as the whole family itself, is we do family therapy weekly. And what that time offers is that it's not only a healing process for the emotional dynamic and relationships that the client has with their guardians or their parents, but it also offers space for them to talk to nutritionists that are on staff. It allows them to have space to talk to their client or our client, their child, on what it is that was unhealthy or not supportive of a healthy mindset with their relationship to food at home. And so we will often break down the food rules that they have created for their child and how that is negatively impacting their views of food in general.
Yeah. I love all of this information, but I would love to, like, do you have maybe an example success story that like that you've got to see this one person come in with whatever and what that journey looked like for them, and they left the program or the facility and they're like healthy and great? Like, do you have maybe a story or two to share, like an example that kind of illustrates all of this information that we're kind of talking about?
I would love to share, some success stories.
Okay.
So one of my favorite success stories that we have is we have a client who came in. The eating disorder was early on. It thankfully the family caught it within the first 6 months of when it was really being displayed and shifting from disordered eating to eating and eating disorder itself. So this client was with us for 8 weeks. They were able to go back. The very first thing they did was switch schools. We recognized within, we recognized within our treatment that their peers were not a supportive unit for them. So thankfully, they had the support of their parents to go home, switch schools. They did that in the middle of their senior year.
Wow.
And was able to start fresh, create new friendships, and we hear from them weekly. I am able to get an update. Sometimes it's twice a week. We're getting email updates from this one client, just letting us know how healthy they are, how thankful they are that they have been able to create healthy boundaries with themselves, but also no longer calorie count, no longer look at size on, what they're wearing, but they are choosing to order based off of their desires for what they're craving in that moment. They order it, they eat it, they enjoy it, which is what we all strive for, to really listen to hunger cues in our body and see what and see what we need.
That's amazing. Do you have any other stories you want to share?
Yes, I have another client who just recently left our facility, and he was just such a positive person in general. It's very interesting when you get a client who comes in and they are completing meals right off at the first day. That is not always the case, but this client had started that way. What's great about our facility, Paige, is that we are a voluntary facility. So we are a place where ideally we want our clients to be coming in and they're very aware of their eating disorder. Their family is aware. They're able to come in and say, I'm ready for treatment. When we get those types of clients, we're so thankful because they're there and they're showing up for themselves as much as we are.
Right.
This is an example of one of those clients, and he was able to come in and start off completing every meal, every snack, and just continued to get healthier in terms of brain cognizant, being able to put together why he was doing what he was doing with his therapist and then with us as his coaches. And as time went on, he was more and more confident about returning home, being a part of his lacrosse team, just being able to share with us as the staff what it looked like for him to have an eating disorder. And one of the things that I remember taking away from my conversations with him is that he said, it's okay to open up to people. I didn't know I could do that before. And this is a 17-year-old, you
Yeah.
know?
Aw, that's so
So,
sweet. So, I mean, so that was your takeaway from him. My next question is, I'm sure these people come in and they learn so much from you and other staff members, and they come out the other side with like so much knowledge and, healing. What do you feel like you've learned from them?
I've learned a lot. I've learned that people at a young age can go through something very hard. And with community, they can really thrive. I'm really seeing that, with an imperfect community, but yet with community, we can do so many great things. Even when we have our cards stacked against us at a young age.
Yeah.
So it's really encouraging to see young people who are coming in to our program and they're very aware that they are sick. They are asking for help. And that alone is so courageous to me. I even want to share, with your listeners that the definition of courage is about doing something despite being afraid of it. So it's not a matter of going in and not being afraid and doing something brave, but it's aware that you're afraid of something, aware that something's intimidating, and still continuing on. And that's something that I see in each of our clients.
Yeah. That's amazing. Does your facility only do things in person? Do you have any kind of virtual coaching or therapy or anything like that?
We start off with residential treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that will offer is an immersement to really support the client and get them to a healthy place where they can be living in home, and then doing something like a PHP program, which we also provide. They can go from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and they can do that for several weeks. But what we really hope for is that they would come in, stay with us for anywhere from 4 weeks to what is necessary based off of the client and their needs. And then once they get to a healthy mindset, they have a healthier relationship to food, and then they have that support network going back home. Then they're able to do something like a virtual program or an in-person just during the day.
Right. So if our listeners just so happen to be in your area or know somebody who is in your area, where can they find more information on where you are and what you do and all that, and follow along?
Absolutely. So Montanito is being offered at several different facilities all across the country. We have over 30 locations. I'm at the Atlanta location. And again, we work with adolescents, 11 to 17. There's also areas that work with adults as well. We also offer our program to female and male clients, which is significant in the eating disorder world. So I want to preface that because there are a lot of families who they may have a son, they may have a nephew or a grandson, or even a brother. And, this person's really important to them, but they're struggling and they don't know how to help them. I would really encourage you, if you're that person, to just reach out to a program like Montanito or anything that's in your area that can support this person that you love, because they deserve help and they are a person of value.
Absolutely. And this might be redundant, and if it is, then I just won't add it in. But so previous to the podcast, you wrote in our email, it's appropriate to exercise to handle stress. And you're saying that oftentimes these boys might over-exercise as a way to kind of cope with their stress, but it's not in a healthy way. At what point is it unhealthy? Because I think that there is major stress relief and mental strength that can be built through exercise. So where is that line?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, based off of each client and where they're at, we have to discern, what is the eating disorder voice saying? Because on the outside, our clients' bodies can look very different. And sometimes they don't even look unhealthy, which is, a challenge because you're working with the mental health along with the physical health of a person. So yes, like some of the things that I had shared with you earlier was that in our society right now, it is deemed appropriate for our clients or for people in general to exercise to deal with stress, and working with each family and with each client on what's the motivation, why is the exercise necessary, and is it to the point where it's excessive? These are some of the top questions that we'll ask when we get a new client that is coming in through admissions, because we want to understand why the client is valuing exercise. And if it's to the point where a family has brought in their child, then usually it's because it's become excessive. And there is even a connection between the anxiety and OCD. So a lot of times we'll see clients who are diagnosed with anxiety. They'll get diagnosed with an eating disorder. And so in the back of our minds, especially nursing, we're always just gauging and checking, like, does this person have a history of OCD, or is there a formation of OCD happening that we need to, be looking out for?
Could you give maybe an example of what it would look like? And I know it would be different for everybody, but an example of what it looks like to be over exercising or exercising in an unhealthy way.
Sure. The main thing that a family can look for is if their son or the teen in their family has once had a body type and that body type has changed. So if you are seeing weight loss, if you are seeing more definition, and there is a connection between that and movement, then that could be a sign of an eating disorder. If you're also seeing that they are saying things, like I had said earlier, when you're at the dinner table and they eat maybe half of their meal and they say, I'm full, and they're getting up, and maybe they're getting up to go out and shoot hoops, that might be a sign of an eating disorder. There's also a great example. We had a client who was going through a home renovation. And in this process, they had to block off the hallway for this client in order to get access to their kitchen. So the client had to actually go through their bedroom window out of the house and walk around the house in order to get to the kitchen. What that did is, while the home renovation was going on, this client stopped eating breakfast and eventually stopped eating dinner. So he was only eating lunch at school. He also felt a lot of pressure by the parents to eat a certain way. So then, out of defiance, as teens do, decided, well, then I'm just not going to eat with them. So little things that we can check for: are we creating environments that are speaking positively about our relationship to food and for our teens? Another example is, are we making clear access to healthy options? Or do we have a home renovation going on where we're blocking the kitchen and we're telling our teens to go out of a window? Right.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. This has been so awesome. I'm so excited. And I thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your experience with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Paige. It's been such a great honor to come out and just speak about what's going on right now in male teens and how to help other families who, just want to figure out how to support their kids best.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk later.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Move More, Worry Less. If you love this episode, please subscribe, share, rate, or review us to help us grow our mission. If you don't already, follow us on social at 13 Fit Apparel and visit our website at www.13fitapparel.com. Thanks for listening.